I didn't say a word when they handed me that cease and desist order. I just pulled out Grandpa's 1931 dam construction permit and watched their $45 million lakefront resort become a muddy construction site. The Pine Valley Estates HOA thought they could steal my family's mountain property while I was working oil rigs in North Dakota. These entitled developers built their dream vacation empire on stolen land, complete with boat launches, yacht clubs, and Karens in designer hiking boots patrolling the shoreline. What they didn't know. I'm a petroleum engineer, and that century-old concrete dam had been waiting 92 years for someone stupid enough to build a resort downstream. The arrogance was truly breathtaking, until the floodgates opened and their luxury cabin development got its first taste of an empty lake bed. All this was going to be satisfying. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below, because you're about to witness the most spectacular HOA takedown involving century-old water rights and the simple act of turning off the tap. Let me introduce you to Mason Blackwood, that's me, 38 years old petroleum engineer and fourth-generation owner of 180 acres of prime Colorado mountain land just outside Estes Park. My great-grandfather, who everyone called Gramps, bought this property in 1928, back when Denver was still a cow town. And ski resorts were just frozen hillsides where rich folks went to freeze their butts off. Gramps was the kind of man who believed in building things that lasted forever. In 1931, he constructed a concrete gravity dam across Pine Creek. Nothing flashy, just solid engineering designed to create a 47-acre lake for irrigation livestock and helping downstream neighbors during dry Colorado summers. The State Water Commission even provided technical assistance. Gramps always said someday the lake property would be worth a fortune. But for now, it was paradise, where we fished, hunted, and learned that some things are more valuable than money. Then came my 3 years working petroleum projects in the Bakken, where I specialized in water management and flow systems. Turns out managing water pressure in oil fields teaches you everything about how liquid moves through landscapes and what happens when you mess with natural flow patterns. While I was on a 6-month rotation in Williston, Gramps passed away at 94. The property went into a family trust managed by my well-meaning but clueless cousin Derek, who lives in Phoenix and knows about as much about Colorado water law as I know about cactus farming. He hired a property management company called Summit Land Services to handle maintenance and taxes. The property taxes got paid through automatic bank transfer. But here's the problem. Derek never actually visited the property to check on things. Big mistake. Enter our villain Patricia Pat Sterling, 47 years old, president of Pine Valley Estates HOA, and the kind of woman who drives a white Range Rover and treats Lululemon activewear like business. Formal Pat's got that particular brand of California entitlement that moved to Colorado around 2019. You know, the type where they complain about altitude sickness while demanding the mountains be more accessible and somehow make locals feel like trespassers. On their own land, Pat's married to tech executive Brad Sterling, which tells you everything about how they afford $3 million vacation cabins as starter homes. She's built a reputation for community enhancement projects, which is fancy talk for forcing out anyone who doesn't fit her vision of Instagram, worthy mountain, living the smell of her expensive essential oil diffusers can't mask the stench of privilege and displacement that follows her around like morning fog on the lake. I came home from the oil fields in June 2023, ready to finally spend real time at Gramps Lake property, drove up that familiar dirt road past the old gate, where I'd learned to drive stick shift as a kid, expecting to see that pristine mountain lake sparkling in the Colorado sun. Instead, I found bulldozers, concrete mixers, and survey flags scattered across my lakeshore like some kind of suburban invasion. The crunch of gravel under my work boots felt different somehow. Angrier, I could taste the construction dust and my own rising fury as I marched toward the site foreman. "Sorry, buddy," he said, barely looking up from his clipboard. "Private property. This is Pine Valley Estates, Phase 3 Lakefront Premium Cabins." I called the Sheriff Deputy Garcia, arrived looking uncomfortable, and explained that the HOA had filed adverse possession claims while I was working out of state. apparently when family property sits unoccupied for extended periods. And if developers can prove they've been improving it, they can sometimes claim ownership. It's an old mining law designed to prevent valuable land from sitting unused, but it's become a favorite weapon of developers and HOAs looking to expand their empire. That's when Pat appeared, gliding up in her pristine side-by-side. ATV like some kind of mountain resort dictator, her voice had that practiced yoga instructor tone that immediately made me want to check my wallet. "Your family clearly abandoned this gorgeous lakefront, honey, yaror," she purred while adjusting her designer sunglasses. "We're creating something special here that benefits the entire community." But here's what made my blood pressure spike like a blown wellhead. I discovered her construction crews had installed a massive water intake pump directly from Gramps Lake. They were draining 50,000 gallons daily for concrete mixing dust control and the artificial waterfall features in their luxury cabin designs. The lake level was dropping visibly every day, destroying 92 years of carefully maintained ecosystem balance. As I stood there watching our family lake shrink, Pat's parting words echoed in my ears. "Maybe next time, don't disappear for years, soldier boy." That's when I realized this wasn't just about real estate, it was war. I hired the first real estate attorney I could find. Catastrophic mistake. This Denver hotshot quoted me $125,000 just to challenge the zoning variance, turns out, while I was keeping America's energy flowing. Pat's husband Brad had lobbied through an emergency land use modification, transforming my agricultural heritage property into resort commercial development faster than you can say Silicon Valley money. But here's where my petroleum engineering background became crucial. While that overpriced attorney shuffled papers and billed hours, I was diving into county records like I was hunting for underground oil deposits, and just like in the Bakken, the real treasure was buried in technical documentation. I found Gramps' original 1931 dam construction permits, and they were absolutely beautiful. See, Gramps didn't just pour concrete and hope for the best. He worked directly with the Colorado State Water Commission for flood control, watershed management, and downstream irrigation rights. That meant state jurisdiction with federal backing. And here's your first knowledge nugget: any dam built with state water commission oversight creates permanent water rights that supersede local development claims, period. The familiar taste of coffee and determination hit me as I realized what I'd discovered. This wasn't just property theft anymore, it was water rights violation on a massive scale. But wait, it gets even better. While photocopying permits at the water court, I stumbled across Gramps' original 1928 prior appropriation water rights filing. My great-grandfather had secured senior water rights to the entire Pine Creek watershed. These rights predated the town incorporation, the county water system, and every single luxury cabin stealing my lake water. They weren't just trespassing on my land, they were stealing my water. Meanwhile, Pat was busy playing victim number one. She organized emergency HOA meetings about the dangerous abandoned dam, complete with structural engineers she'd obviously paid in advance. I watched her on the local news, standing beside her perfectly landscaped cabin deck, talking about public safety and community values. "We're concerned about the structural integrity," she said, dabbing at her eyes with organic cotton tissues. "That crumbling dam could fail and flood our families downstream. We have children playing near that water." The hilarious part about local mountain news is they love controversy, but rarely check engineering records if they'd bothered investigating. They would have discovered my dam had passed its most recent inspection with perfect scores and was actually protecting their development from seasonal flooding. But Pat wasn't finished. She posted on Nextdoor, that digital neighborhood surveillance network where HOA presidents flex their petty authority. Her posts warned about unstable property owners and potential environmental hazards. She never used my name directly, but in a mountain community that tight, everyone knew exactly who she meant. The scent of pine needles and diesel exhaust hung heavy in the thin mountain air as I stood on my cabin porch each evening watching their construction crews work extended shifts. They were racing to complete Phase 3 before I could obtain any legal protection. Every night I counted new cabin foundations. Every night our family lake dropped another 2 inches. That's when I called my old petroleum buddy Carlos Mendez, who now works for the Colorado Water Court Enforcement Division. 30 minutes with Carlos taught me more about Western water law than 5 hours with that expensive Denver attorney Mason. Carlos said, "If they are extracting water without valid appropriation rights, that's criminal water theft, and if your dam controls the source, they are basically stealing from a bank vault you own." I started documenting everything: motion-activated trail cameras around the entire lake perimeter, time-stamped photographs of every water extraction flow measurements at 6 points along Pine Creek. My cousin Derek called from Phoenix practically begging me to accept Pat's settlement offer and move on. But this wasn't about money anymore. It was about the sound of industrial pumps draining Gramps Lake 24 hours daily. It was about Pat's designer hiking boots clicking across water court marble during hearings that shouldn't exist. It was about the bitter taste of courthouse vending machine coffee during research sessions that revealed systematic corruption. But most importantly, it was about that damn Gramps built it to create sustainable water supply for the entire watershed. For 92 years, it had provided irrigation for downstream ranchers' wildlife habitat and flood protection. Pat's crew was converting it into a private amenity for millionaire vacation homes. Here's the crucial thing about Colorado water law. It operates on prior appropriation, first in time, first in right, and senior water rights are more sacred than mineral rights, more protected than surface ownership. But you have to understand how to enforce them. As I stood watching another concrete truck rumble past my kitchen window, I realized something important. This battle wasn't going to be won in courtrooms with expensive litigation. It was going to be won with engineering. Pat decided to escalate the intimidation campaign she organized, what she called lake safety patrols. 5 HOA board members in matching fleece vests who stationed themselves at my property entrance like some kind of mountain checkpoint. They photographed every visitor, documented license plates, and filed complaints with the county about suspicious activities. The harassment playbook was textbook development pressure, loud construction noise complaints when I ran equipment during legal hours, unsafe structure citations for my perfectly maintained family cabin that had stood since 1952. Environmental hazard reports about my septic system that had passed inspection 6 months earlier, but the real slap in the face came when Brad used his tech connections to report me to Veteran Affairs as a potentially unstable individual who might be struggling with civilian readjustment. The VA counselor who showed up was understanding, but thorough. She had to complete mandatory wellness assessments while Pat watched from her cabin deck like she was supervising a military inspection. Then began the coordinated bureaucratic blitzkrieg building. Inspector Fire Marshal Environmental Health and Wildlife officers all descended the same week like regulatory special forces. Each found minor violations requiring expensive remediation. The building inspector, who somehow happened to be Brad's former business partner, declared my cabin needed $15,000 in foundation updates. The wildlife officer claimed my lake was creating unauthorized wetlands habitat. Despite 92 years of established ecosystem, I recognized the pressure tactic immediately. It's identical to what petroleum companies use against small landowners, overwhelm them with regulatory compliance until they surrender and sell. But two could play regulatory warfare while they buried me in paperwork. I was making strategic phone calls. Carlos at the water court was fascinated to learn Pat's development had never filed required water extraction permits. Turns out any project withdrawing more than 15 acre-feet annually requires state approval and environmental impact assessment. The violations carried fines starting at $10,000 per day. Meanwhile, my research revealed Pat's entire development violated Colorado's stream access laws, which guarantee public recreational use of water bodies regardless of adjacent property ownership. Insurance companies had refused coverage until the HOA provided flood mitigation studies. Their solution: permanently lower the lake level and eliminate seasonal flooding that protected downstream properties. Here's your second knowledge: nugget insurance fraud in mountain developments often involves misrepresenting flood risks. When developers lie about water management to secure coverage, that's federal mail fraud with serious prison time. The deeper I investigated, the clearer the pattern became. This wasn't Pat's first water theft rodeo. Her previous HOA in Park City, Utah had paid $1.8 million in state fines for an identical lake drainage scheme. She'd relocated to Colorado just ahead of federal prosecutors now targeting new victims in a different state. Pat spread rumors about my mental stability and potential violence. She hired private investigators to dig through my employment records and organize petitions demanding the county condemn my property as abandoned infrastructure. "We have families recreating on this lake," she told the Estes Park Trail newspaper. "We cannot allow unstable individuals to threaten community safety with dangerous structures." While she played victim, I was building coalitions through online forums. I connected with other HOA victims and discovered systematic patterns. Patty's organization had acquired 8 properties through similar tactics over 4 years. Each case featured identical playbooks, harassment, regulatory warfare, and mysterious zoning changes that benefited Brad's development investments. I partnered with my downstream neighbor, rancher Jim Sullivan, whose century-old irrigation rights had been threatened by the lake drainage. I connected with Maria Gonzalez, whose family's fishing guide business faced bankruptcy due to dropping water levels. These weren't isolated incidents. They were coordinated attacks on established water users by newcomers who thought money trumped law. The vibration of heavy machinery through my cabin floorboards reminded me daily what we were fighting for every morning. Concrete mixers rumbled past my kitchen. Every evening I documented water theft that was slowly destroying Gramps' legacy. But I was also preparing strategically. I installed precise water level monitoring equipment and calculated exact volumes being stolen. 3,200 acre-feet annually worth $340,000 in agricultural water value. The sandy texture of exposed lake bed between my fingers told stories no attorney could articulate. This wasn't just property theft. It was environmental destruction that threatened an entire watershed. Then the certified letter arrived. The county planned emergency dam safety inspections with potential condemnation authority. The hearing was scheduled in 2 weeks. Pat's strategy was transparent in her newspaper quote. "Sometimes protecting the community requires difficult decisions about aging infrastructure." But watching storm clouds build over the Continental Divide that evening, I realized something crucial. Those weren't just weather patterns gathering. They represented opportunity. Pat went thermonuclear. Brad fast-tracked emergency public safety hearings scheduled for 10 days while simultaneously offering me $850,000 cash for property appraised at $2.3 million. The message was crystal clear: accept the lowball, buy out or lose everything through condemnation. The local newspaper published a devastating hit piece that portrayed me as an unstable veteran blocking community. Progress. Troubled oil worker threatens lakefront families. Read the headline complete with photographs, making my family cabin look like condemned property and me like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. Pat's media masterstroke was the carefully staged photo opportunity. She arranged it perfectly. 30 concerned families with children positioned near the lake with professional photographers capturing worried expressions while my supposedly dangerous dam loomed ominously in the background. The social media campaign went viral with #ProtectOurLake. "Our children deserve safe recreation," she told Channel 9 news crews, dabbing tears with designer tissues, not whatever issues he brought back from the oil fields. She was partially correct about one thing. I did bring something back from petroleum engineering: the ability to recognize when someone's trying to steamroll you with propaganda and the technical expertise to expose their lies. Carlos called with intelligence that changed everything. The state water court had opened formal investigation into Pine Creek. Water theft based on my detailed complaints. But here's the bombshell: Pat's Utah HOA still faced pending federal charges for interstate water fraud, environmental crimes, follow individuals across state lines. While Pat performed for social media cameras, I discovered her entire financial empire was built on fraudulent foundations. The HOA's construction loans required guaranteed water access for approval. If those rights reverted to their legal owner, the development would become financially underwater. Literal and figurative irony wasn't lost on me. They'd stolen my water to inflate their property values. Now their greed would leave them high and dry. Patty's desperation showed when she offered $1.2 million cash 24-hour deadline. When I refused, she flew to Phoenix trying to convince Derek with sob stories about his unstable cousin threatening innocent families that backfired spectacularly. Derek might not understand water law, but he knows family loyalty. He called laughing some entitled California transplant, just tried to convince me my cousin is crazy. I told her if she contacts our family again, we're calling the FBI, while Pat alienated potential allies. I was building strategic partnerships. I connected with environmental attorney Sarah Chen, who specialized in pro bono water rights protection. Together, we assembled a coalition with downstream water users who'd suffered from the lake drainage. Jim Sullivan provided historical documentation, proving his family had used Pine Creek water since 1887. Maria Gonzalez contributed photographs of her grandfather's fishing lodge from the 1940s, sustained by the same lake. Pat was draining. The Colorado Wildlife Federation was particularly interested. When they learned the drainage had destroyed critical habitat for 3 protected trout species, turns out killing endangered fish while committing water theft attracts federal attention remarkably fast during nighttime reconnaissance. Using skills from petroleum surveys, I discovered something beautiful. Gramps Dam wasn't just simple concrete construction. The 1931 design included hydraulic release valves with manual controls that hadn't been operated since 1995. The hollow echo of water flowing through those release mechanisms during my midnight tests confirmed everything. The system remained fully functional, designed for exactly this situation. Controlled drainage to demonstrate legal water ownership. The calculations were perfect. Current lake volume, 847 acre-feet dam capacity, 950 acre-feet. Recent snowmelt had filled us to maximum sustainable levels using aerial drone photography. I mapped exact locations of those luxury cabins relative to the original creek bed. 12 cabins were built directly in the historical floodplain. 8 more had foundations below seasonal high water marks. Here's the beautiful engineering reality. Pat's crews had installed decorative stone channels and artificial waterfalls using concrete and landscaping. They looked impressive, but weren't designed for actual water flow. Meanwhile, my release system was engineered specifically for controlled flooding and watershed management. Then Pat made her catastrophic mistake. Her crews installed permanent concrete barriers to completely block Pine Creek's original channel. This would eliminate my downstream water delivery and permanently destroy the established ecosystem, but it also provided perfect legal justification for emergency water release. The State Weather Service predicted heavy spring runoff, perfect seasonal cover for routine dam maintenance. As I stood at those manual release controls reading Gramps' journal about helping neighbors during floods, the moral clarity crystallized. Time to restore natural water flow while researching courthouse records. For the 4th time, I discovered a misfiled document that changed everything, buried in 1931. Tax records was the original watershed management compact from Gramps Dam construction. The language was legally bulletproof. Dam. Operators shall maintain natural creek flow patterns to preserve downstream water rights and prevent flood damage in perpetuity. This wasn't just permission for water management. It was legal obligation that superseded any HOA agreements or county ordinances. Sarah Chen's investigation revealed something even more damaging. The HOAs insurance applications contained systematic lies. They'd claimed minimal flood risk and permanent water access, guaranteed by state permits to secure $89 million development coverage. Here's your third knowledge. Nugget insurance fraud in resort development often carries federal criminal penalties. When you lie about environmental risks for coverage, that's mail fraud with mandatory prison time. The deeper we investigated, the more systematic the corruption became. Brad's construction company wasn't just the HOA contractor. He owned 40% equity in the development. Every luxury cabin built on my stolen lakefront generated direct profit for his investment portfolio. He'd never recused himself from county planning meetings that approved his own projects. Carlos shared state findings that made my petroleum engineer blood boil. The lake drainage had eliminated spawning habitat for greenback cutthroat trout, a species that had recovered from near extinction and thrived in Pine Lake for decades. Colorado Parks and Wildlife had documented the fish kill, but somehow their report disappeared in Brad's tech company's server before triggering federal prosecution. They weren't just stealing land and water, they were destroying endangered species recovery, but the smoking gun came from Sarah's banking connections. Construction loans were secured by fraudulent environmental assessments, claiming lake drainage was temporary construction water. Management banks believed water would return to natural levels after development completion. If my water rights were enforced, the entire development would violate lending agreements, triggering immediate repayment of $23 million. That's when I found Gramps' handwritten engineering logs in the cabin basement. His 1935 entry brought tears to my eyes. Released water today helped Sullivan Ranch and 4 others through dry spell. That's what neighbors do. Water belongs to the whole watershed, not just whoever's closest. The dam was never about our family's exclusive benefit. It was about community stewardship, managing resources to help everyone in the watershed survive droughts, floods, and seasonal variations. Reading those logs, I understood what Pat had really stolen. It wasn't just lakefront property. It was 92 years of community cooperation. My great-grandfather had built one neighbor at a time. My engineering analysis confirmed what I suspected. Pat's water extraction was creating dangerous upstream flooding during heavy runoff. The artificial drainage channels could not handle natural spring. Melting the original creek bed provided flood control for the entire development, and my release system was the only way to safely manage seasonal water flow. Timeline pressure was building. Spring runoff season was beginning earlier due to climate change. If I waited for legal appeals, natural flooding would happen anyway, potentially endangering those cabin foundations. But if I acted proactively, I could demonstrate proper water management while proving the development violated state environmental law. A controlled release would show natural flood patterns without structural damage, while establishing my legal authority over watershed management. Standing at those release controls, watching sunset paint the Continental Divide, purple holding Gramps' engineering notebooks, the decision crystallized. This wasn't about revenge. It was about honoring 92 years of responsible water stewardship. Pat had systematically destroyed mountain community, water sharing. Jim Sullivan lost irrigation that sustained his family ranch for 5 generations. Maria Gonzalez watched her fishing guide heritage disappear with dropping lake levels. 6 other families sold generational properties under pressure from Brad's development machine. But the state environmental investigation was scheduled next week. Perfect timing. If I demonstrated natural water flow before their inspection, it would prove the HOA violated multiple state and federal laws. The musty scent of old concrete and hydraulic fluid reminded me this equipment was built for permanence. Gramps designed these controls for exactly this moment, when someone would need to defend the watershed against those who saw water as commodity rather than community resource. As spring weather patterns shifted and mountain runoff accelerated, I made the decision that would restore balance time to open those valves and let the lake remember its original purpose. You do not drain a lake without military precision. This wasn't revenge. It was an engineering operation with legal cover, environmental justification, and community backing. First, I assembled my technical team. Sarah Chen coordinated legal strategy, filing additional state complaints, ensuring maximum oversight when the release began. Carlos provided state water court coverage, guaranteeing investigators would witness what he called routine seasonal water management. Jim Sullivan documented generations of downstream agriculture supported by natural creek flow, providing historical proof that controlled releases were traditional watershed practice. Maria Gonzalez offered her lodge as media staging area, bringing credibility as respected local business owner. Sarah's legal approach was brilliant. She filed emergency agricultural water rights enforcement, claiming the dam compact legally required seasonal releases for downstream irrigation. We weren't violating law, we were enforcing it. Here's crucial water rights knowledge. Agricultural and environmental water claims almost always supersede recreational development, especially with historical documentation proving continuous beneficial use. The key is comprehensive paperwork predating any development claims. My technical preparation was pure petroleum engineering precision. I developed detailed release operation protocols, controlled valve opening, starting 5 a.m. gradual increase over 6 hours peak flow at 11 a.m. water volume, calculated to demonstrate natural spring patterns without structural damage to legitimate improvements. Safety remained paramount. I posted warning notices 48 hours advance and personally contacted volunteer fire departments. This wasn't reckless flooding. It was carefully managed demonstration of legal water ownership. Sarah contacted environmental reporters from Denver Post and local television stations. Jim arranged community witnesses for agricultural water restoration. The strategy was simple control narrative before Pat could spin it as unstable veteran attacks innocent families. Our information network was straight from corporate intelligence playbook. Maria monitored her communications through local business networks. Never underestimate small-town information. Sharing the hardware store owner who happened to be Carlos' cousin reported county planning office closed meetings. My petroleum contacts provided industrial drone surveillance for legal documentation. While I rebuilt release valve systems with modern hydraulic controls, Sarah waged economic warfare. She contacted insurance investigators with fraud evidence, arranged state banking reviews of construction loan documentation, and prepared whistleblower complaints about Brad's conflicts. Of interest, the timing coordination was perfect. Weather Service confirmed major snowmelt in 48 hours. Sarah scheduled state environmental inspection. Same week, Jim organized downstream water users demonstration for historical rights. Documentation, natural spring, runoff federal oversight and community support converging exactly when needed. But I understood Pat's psychology. She always doubled down under pressure, so I prepared for predictable escalation. Emergency, HOA meetings, media character assassination, probably restraining orders filed through corrupt local judges. Sarah drafted preemptive responses to each expected attack. Evidence preservation was critical. Comprehensive photo documentation of current water extraction, recorded testimony from affected water users, historical photographs proving original creek flow and seasonal patterns. Sarah secured everything in state court filings, ensuring legal protection. Safety protocols included volunteer fire department coordination, communication with all downstream residents, detailed notices posted in English and Spanish, plus evacuation procedures we wouldn't need, just demonstrating responsible management. Economic pressure was Sarah's expertise. She contacted state banking regulators about loan irregularities, reached Colorado Attorney General with insurance fraud evidence, and prepared civil RICO lawsuit, alleging systematic racketeering. Here's another knowledge. Nugget: coordinated regulatory pressure often forces faster settlement than individual lawsuits. When multiple agencies investigate simultaneously, defendants can't defend all fronts. The scent of WD-40 and mountain air filled evening atmosphere as I serviced dam equipment and tested release valves under minimal flow. Everything functioned perfectly. Gramps built systems engineered for longevity. I prepared the cabin for potential siege, knowing Pat would attempt everything to stop restoration. Sarah filed court orders preventing interference with lawful water management and established secure communications using encrypted radio systems, standing at those controls for final testing, watching snow-capped peaks reflect in what remained of our family lake. Everything aligned perfectly. Weather forecast confirmed heavy snowmelt in 36 hours. State investigators arriving in 30 hours. Pat scheduled for morning news, appearance in 18 hours, probably planning final character assassination. The timing was perfect. Dawn would bring justice and 92 years of stolen water back where it belonged. Pat's panic reached desperate levels when she hired private security to guard the lake perimeter. These weren't local rent-a-cops, these were the same. tactical gear enthusiasts who work corporate security and treat HOA disputes like military operations. My trail cameras recorded them attempting to sabotage release valve controls at 3 a.m. One genius was filmed, trying to weld the manual controls closed while his partner provided lookout. Carlos had arranged county sheriff surveillance, and Deputy Martinez was positioned perfectly when they made their move. The arrest was beautiful. Mr. Tactical Vest claimed they were protecting community infrastructure from dangerous individuals, but it's difficult explaining why you're carrying welding equipment at 3 a.m. on someone else's property. Pat's media campaign reached pure desperation. She appeared on Denver morning television wearing her most conservative outfit, speaking in that trembling voice politicians use for victim sympathy. Veterans need proper mental health support, not access to weapons, she told hosts while dabbing designer tissues. This man learned water management in dangerous situations, and now he's threatening to destroy children's vacation homes. Brad provided expert witness testimony about catastrophic dam failure risks, conveniently omitting that my dam exceeded all safety requirements for 92 years. But while Pat performed for television, my surveillance training produced evidence. I documented every sabotage attempt, every illegal entry, every piece of proof for criminal conspiracy cases. Carlos revealed state investigators had been monitoring Brad's phone communications as part of ongoing corruption probe. These people were more panicked than I'd realized. The legal assault was swift. Brad used emergency county authority for restraining order hearings scheduled 7 a.m., obviously hoping to catch us unprepared. Judge Patricia Walker, Brad's campaign contributor who'd received $25,000 from his development company, agreed to emergency public safety motion. Sarah discovered the corruption connection, immediately filing for Walker's recusal. But we expected judicial fixing. If they couldn't stop water release legally, they'd use corrupt judges. Meanwhile, Pat organized neighborhood safety demonstrations to physically surround my property. 40 HOA residents appeared with folding chairs, coolers, and "Protect Our Community" banners. Planning to live stream my water release as environmental terrorism, the optics supported her narrative: suburban families versus unstable veteran with dangerous equipment. But Jim Sullivan mobilized differently. He brought 60 ranchers, families, and water users, supporting what we called agricultural rights restoration. Maria organized counter-demonstration with historical photographs showing the lake at natural levels. Sarah arranged Colorado Wildlife Federation and Sierra Club representatives. Two competing narratives were about to collide: veteran threatens families versus community defends. Water rights, technical sabotage escalated when security footage revealed concrete poured into release channels overnight, creating blockages designed to cause actual structural damage if valves opened. This wasn't harassment, it was attempted infrastructure destruction disguised as vandalism. I spent pre-dawn hours with jackhammer, clearing sabotage while documenting every chunk as criminal evidence. The metallic taste of exhaustion mixed with determination as I realized their desperation level. Brad used emergency county powers, declaring my property imminent public hazard, authorizing fire department seizure of dangerous dam infrastructure. Fire Chief Rodriguez, one of few honest officials remaining, privately warned. This was purely political. "Mason, you've got maybe 4 hours before they force intervention," he advised. "Make it count." Insurance investigation breakthrough came at perfect timing. Sarah's fraud reports triggered state investigation. Colorado Insurance Commission froze all HOA development policies without valid coverage. Construction faced immediate work stoppage. Financial pressure finally hit where it mattered: Pat and Brad's bank accounts. Tony accelerated state inspection, 12 hours due to credible sabotage reports. State agents were en route, arriving 9 a.m. If release valves opened during official inspection, it would become state evidence of proper watershed management. But Pat's cruelest move was contacting veteran mental health services, claiming I'd made suicide threats, requiring involuntary psychiatric evaluation. The VA counselor arrived at 6 a.m. just as I prepared for valve operation. I had to prove mental competency while simultaneously preparing to demonstrate water management, not exactly normal. Tuesday morning conversation. Derek called from Phoenix, voice shaking. "I can't lose more family, please, Mason. This isn't what Gramps wanted." For a moment, resolve wavered. Then I discovered Gramps' final notebook entry about standing up to bullies. Determination hardened like concrete. "Sometimes you have to drain the lake to save the creek." At 8:47 a.m., with state agents watching and morning sun illuminating the Continental Divide, I opened release valves to 30% capacity. The sound was magnificent. Not violent destruction, but gentle whisper of water. Returning home for the first time in 18 months, Pine Creek flowed in its original channel, exactly where nature intended. Jim Sullivan knelt beside restored creek, cupping clear mountain water in weathered rancher hands. Tears streaming. "This water fed my great-grandfather's cattle for 80 years, he whispered. Pat's reaction was immediate and predictable. She screamed at state agents to arrest the terrorist, her carefully composed television demeanor cracking like thin ice. State water engineer David Kim calmly explained, "Ma'am, this gentleman has legal authority to manage his water rights." But Pat live-streamed on Facebook, her voice rising to hysteria. "He's destroying our children's vacation homes. This is what happens when we let damaged veterans have dangerous equipment." Except water wasn't destroying anything. It flowed exactly where it belonged in original creek bed. Her development had illegally blocked local news helicopters, circled broadcasting release operation, live Denver Post reporter interviewed downstream ranchers about restored water access when Pat tried hijacking the interview. "This veteran uses military training to attack civilians," she shrieked. Reporter, clearly confused, asked, "Ma'am, the water's flowing in the natural creek bed. How exactly is this an attack?" You could hear Pat's narrative collapsing in real time. Brad frantically called Judge Walker, screaming about property values and political contributions, that psychos destroying millions in development value. Apparently forgetting Sarah was recording from courthouse steps. "Here's legal knowledge. Colorado is one-party consent state, meaning you only need one person's permission to record conversations, and that person can be yourself." Engineering validation was beautiful. State agent Kim measured flow, confirming. It matched historical seasonal patterns exactly. Carlos documented everything. This demonstrates how creek flowed naturally before 2022. Extraction state agencies prioritize natural watersheds over development convenience. We were proving that principle in real time. Mrs. Gonzalez irrigation system filled for first time in 18 months. 5 downstream ranches reported restored stock pond access. Local diner owner brought coffee and breakfast burritos saying, "My family's fished this creek for generations. This is how it should flow." Even some Pat supporters quietly departed as they realized no cabins were actually threatened. Turns out it's difficult maintaining righteous indignation when your disaster is just water flowing where water naturally belongs. Insurance collapse accelerated when construction company received cease and desist from state investigators. All work stopped on HOA development pending fraud investigation. Pat discovered her homeowner insurance might be voided due to fraudulent water access claims. Financial house of cards collapsed faster than poorly built dam. But Pat wasn't surrendering. She called Brad, panicking, "Get trucks down here, block that creek." Brad, apparently learning nothing from security arrests, sent 4 concrete trucks to accidentally spill loads across creek bed. State agents immediately arrested drivers for interfering with state environmental investigation. Turns out obstructing state water enforcement is felony, not civil matter. Technical success exceeded calculations. Water flow stabilized at optimal levels for agriculture and environment. No flooding of legitimate structures. Creek stayed within natural banks exactly as 92 years of seasonal patterns proved it would. My petroleum engineering had been perfect. Political fallout was immediate. County Commissioner Stevens arrived, demanding Brad's resignation. This corruption embarrassed our entire county. He announced to media, "You're finished." State investigators expanded probe to include RICO charges for systematic development fraud. Carlos told me later. This is evidence we needed for criminal prosecution. Sweetest moment came when Pat realized her $4.2 million lakefront investment was worthless without fraudulent water access. She screamed across the creek, "You've destroyed everything. 40 families depend on this." My response was calm, measured, and loud enough for cameras. "No, ma'am, I restored everything. Your families can purchase legitimate water rights just like everyone else." Pat stormed off, threatening federal lawsuits that would never materialize, as Jim's extended family arrived with homemade tamales, and Maria organized traditional blessing ceremony for restored creek. I realized something important. This was never about revenge, it was about stewardship. The kind Gramps built, one neighbor at a time, one season at a time, one act of community service at a time. Media narrative shifted completely. Environmental groups praised valve operation as model watershed restoration, original veteran floods development. Story became community reclaims stolen water. Sometimes truth flows as naturally as water finding proper course. Judge Walker. His courtroom at 3 p.m. Packed beyond capacity. Media, crews, ranchers, HOA residents, and state agents filled every available space with overflow. Watching through windows, you could feel electricity. This wasn't legal hearing, it was community reckoning. Pat arrived with Houston attorney team expert witnesses and enough legal firepower for small war. She'd traded activewear for conservative business suit, playing concerned community leader, protecting innocent families. I showed up with Sarah wearing simple flannel shirt and Gramps' old work boots. Sometimes best armor is just being comfortable in your own skin. Gallery divided like disputed election hoe supporters left clutching "Protect our investment" signs. Farming community right? With calloused hands and determined faces, Pat's attorney opened dramatically, presenting photos of muddy construction sites, claiming $4.7 million flood damage from my valve operation. They presented psychiatrist who'd never met me diagnosing combat-related property destruction based on newspaper articles. "Your Honor," attorney declared, gesturing like I was war criminal. "This disturbed veteran uses military engineering to terrorize innocent families. He's weaponized water management against children." Courtroom buzzed until Sarah stood for response. She presented 1931 Watershed Compact, legally requiring seasonal creek flow. State Agent Kim testified valve operation restored natural water patterns without causing legitimate property damage. Historical photographs proved current levels matched. 80 years, natural seasonal variation. Here's final knowledge. Nugget legal water rights. Documentation always supersedes development claims, especially with state environmental agency support. Carlos took stand as state enforcement officer. His testimony was devastating. HOA development violated 4 separate state environmental laws, committed systematic insurance fraud, and destroyed protected fish habitat. Judge Walker squirmed as federal crimes detailed in her courtroom, calculating whether political loyalty to Brad worth potential prosecution for obstruction. Breaking point came when Sarah called Brad as witness under oath. He admitted fast-tracking zoning while I worked out of state, revealed financial stake in construction company. When Sarah played recorded conversation about property values, Brad exploded, "This is state setup." Storming toward exit, "We did nothing illegal." His recorded words proved conspiracy better than any prosecutor. Real emotional power came from community testimony. Jim Sullivan described 4 generations ranching, destroyed by water theft, voice breaking, discussing grandfather's dreams dying with stolen creek. Maria showed photographs of family fishing lodge, vibrant before extraction, empty. After her quiet dignity louder than legal arguments, Fire Chief Rodriguez testified, valve operation was professionally executed, 0 safety violations downstream, ranchers confirmed agricultural access fully restored. Then Pat testified for final performance. He returned from oil fields, damaged, Your Honor, pointing at me with trembling manicured fingers. He's taking revenge on innocent families, using psychological warfare against children and destroying property values. She claimed I threatened her safety, described valve operation as environmental terrorism designed to bankrupt residents. When Sarah called me to testify, courtroom went silent. I presented Gramps' engineering logs explaining petroleum calculations, spoke directly to Judge Walker, Your Honor, I didn't flood anyone. I restored creek stolen from this community for 92 years. Mic drop came when Sarah presented final evidence. Pat's Utah HOA paying $1.8 million state fines, identical water theft scheme. State prosecutor announced criminal investigation. Interstate environmental fraud. Conspiracy courtroom erupted as corruption scope became clear. Judge Walker denied all restraining requests, ruled valve operation legal and beneficial. Ordered HOA cease interference with state environmental investigation. Her warning to Brad was pointed, this court will not obstruct lawful state environmental enforcement. As state agents escorted Brad from courtroom, banking investigators served additional warrants. Pat surrounded by reporters with nowhere to hide. She refused comment, speeding away in Range Rover, probably calling moving companies. I emerged to cheering crowds, ranchers, environmentalists, curious townspeople who'd witnessed justice.